Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Doug Dahman, and I'm the Site Coordinator and Content Specialist here at the Civil War Museum. On behalf of the entire staff of the Kenosha Public Museums, I'd like to welcome and thank you for attending this evening's session entitled United Against Hate, Identifying, Reporting, and Preventing Hate Crimes. I'd also like to thank the Planning Committee for their work to make tonight's program possible, as well as the speakers and panelists for sharing their time, insight, and expertise with our community. The museums are proud to partner with the Coalition for Dismantling Racism to host this evening's program, as well as future programs that will be forthcoming. With that being said, I'd like to introduce and invite to the podium Adeline Green from the Coalition for Dismantling Racism.
Hello, everyone. Hello again, everyone. As Doug indicated, my name is Adeline Green, and I'd like to also welcome you on behalf of the partners who planned this event. They include the Coalition for Dismantling Racism, Congregations United to Serve Humanity, the Kenosha Public Museums, and the Kenosha Public Library. We're really happy to have them as partners here. We're also proud to be in partnership with the Federal Department of Justice, the FBI, and Homeland Security, who are all represented here, as well as our local police chief. And we decided to have this event because of some of the incidents that have been happening in our community and across, other communities. And this particular training and courageous conversation, we're calling United Against Hate. Our coalition has a mission, and our mission is to identify and expose racism and to work for racial justice. This forum is one of the ways that we hope to do this, by educating and making people aware of some of the warning signs and signals that feed into racism and hatred. During our program today, you'll be given information from federal and local officials on the types of things that constitute hate crimes. They include how to respond to report acts of hate and why it's important to do this. No one wants to be on the receiving end of a hate crime, and it's up to all of us to recognize and report acts of hatred and racism, which often, as you know, go hand in hand. We want to do whatever we can to ensure that there's no place for hatred in our community, no place for racism or religious discrimination. To that end, we brought these subject matter experts here to provide some information and education about hate crimes. And we'll also hear from our police chief, as well as Rabbi Dina Feingold and a representative of Congregations United to Serve Humanity, Lori Hawkins. So I think a lot of you know that recently the Jewish community has been the target of several acts of hate right here in Kenosha. And that included some literature distributions that were really spreading false information and hateful information. And we're appalled by this happening in our community, and we want to do whatever we can to make sure this does not continue here. At today's presentation, you'll also be able to ask questions after the presenters give their information, and give your input on how we can work together to eradicate hatred in our communities and elsewhere. Our goal today is that you gain some insight and useful tools to help identify and report hate crimes so that we all remain vigilant and we're all united against hate. So I'm going to introduce Ken Gales, who is the public information.
Chief first.
You're going to do the introductions, Ken. I'm bringing you to the podium so that you can introduce the panelists. That's what we decided.
One of us knows what I'm doing.
So yes, Ken is going to come forward, Ken Gales, and as I was saying, he is he's the public information officer for the United States Attorney's Office, representing the Eastern District of Wisconsin. And he will introduce our panel members today, and then they will give their presentations, and we'll follow our guidelines, won't we, Ken?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate having all of you
had two responsibilities and I already screwed up one. In any event, as Adelaide points out, our panel today consists of Chief Patrick Patton, Chris Ladwick, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District, as well as Aaron Lucas, Supervisor Special Agent from the FBI. Chief Patton, next to her. And then on the far end, we've got John Bush from Homeland Security. There's also Steve Caballero back there waiting, who's our law enforcement coordinator for the U.S. Attorney's Office. So we'll get right into the program. I just have one request. To make sure you sign in out there on the sign-in rosters, because if you do, and include your email message so that we can give you some great parting gifts in the form of information and literature regarding hate crimes, what they are, what constitutes them, and how you can go about reporting them to help keep the community safe. So again, make sure you sign in out there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Patton.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your evening tonight to come out and actually spend some time with us and talk about some of the stuff that's in the news and some of the things that are maybe putting some fear in our community. One of the things I did when I first took over was start to make some changes and reaching out to some of the individuals that you have here today and start partnering and seeing where our community can start getting other resources from that we generally had not reached out to and build those gaps. One of the first places we did that was the U.S. Attorney's Office. And Steve Caballero in the back is always in the back and humble about what he does, but he's brought more training to our community in the last 10 months in regards to securities, and he's brought in different types of trainings for Office of School Security and making sure that the needs and the fears that we had, that we felt we needed to increase the training and the accessibility of the public that we had. So big thank you to Steve, and he's always been good at partnering with some of the other federal partners that we have here. The U.S. Attorney's Office, like I had mentioned, the FBI is here, Department of Homeland Security, and then the community partners like Rabbi Feingold, who has helped bring that this training here through them. So I wanted to appreciate and notice and recognize those people. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about was this is kind of our new investment in believing in the return on investment in relationship building. We know that we need to be a little bit more forward-facing as a police department. We know that we need to be more accessible. And while we have a lot of those programs in place and we're building on a lot of those, these are the forums that we're able to sit down, listen to the concerns of the community, and maybe make some adjustments and reflect. So being here today, I hope we can have some open dialogue and honest dialogue that we can take back and hopefully build upon what we're trying to do in our police department to kind of change the image that we have. So with that, just some of the things I want to let everyone know that we're here. I have the assistant chief from my department, Tom Hanchy here, and next to him is our crime prevention officer, John Wenberg. They're here to kind of help bridge that gap as well. Specifically, John Wenberg, who's part of our crime prevention office. Some of the relationships that he's built over the years and some of the things that we're hoping can get more out to the community is what he actually does. How does he help the community in some of the needs? One of the things I think we should highlight, and maybe we don't have, this is the forum for it, but to let everyone know what we have is he does a lot of the building assessment securities, or security assessments for us. So if you are you run a place of worship or you know someone that needs their facility examined or have an assessment, he does trainings. He's going to do one with the Department of Justice this year as well, so that he can go through and talk about some of the things that you can do to make your building safer. That's everything from businesses. He works very, very closely with the schools and obviously places of worship that highlight some of the concerns we have today. So I hope everyone is excited. I hope everyone can have an open dialogue and conversation. I appreciate being invited here. I'm not going to steal time speaking about us, but I do want to take a lot of time and listen. If you do have questions, I'll help answer at the end. But I look forward to hearing from our federal partners and experts as well, so we can learn and continue to get better. So thank you guys for having us.
We're going to have Dina come forward. I want to remind people that there are treats over here that we would like for you to have. You don't have to wait, you don't have to be polite, you can just walk over and take a treat. But Dina's going to come up and give a local perspective, followed by Yolanda Jackson-Lewis after the question and answers. And so remember, if you have questions, we prefer that you write them down. If you have a burning question, you of course can stand up and ask it, but if you would do that, we would appreciate it. So thank you, and Dina is coming forward.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dina Feingold. I'm the rabbi at Beth Hillel Temple. And I wish this event didn't need to happen and that I wasn't called upon to speak tonight. This is a topic about which I do not want to have expertise, but unfortunately I do. All rabbis do, all who work in Jewish institutions do, all Jewish owners of businesses do, and to some extent all Jews have experience in responding to hate. It's a sad reality, but one we must face in a practical and forthright manner. I've been asked to share the Jewish experience in Kenosha this evening as an example of a religious community that has dealt with hate speech. I like the term that you used here, hate incidents, better than hate speech, and how we have responded. While anti-Semitism is not new to the Jewish community, it has dramatically ramped up in recent years and even in the past few weeks. In 2022, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, tabulated 3,697 anti-Semitic incidents throughout the United States. This was a 36% increase from 2021, and the highest number on record since the ADL began tracking anti-Semitic incidents in 1979. This is the third time in the past 5 years that the year-end total has been the highest number ever recorded. Since the Hamas massacre of Israeli civilians on October 7th, the Anti-Defamation League has recorded a significant spike in anti-Semitic incidents across the United States. Preliminary data from the ADL Center on Extremism indicates that reported incidents of harassment, vandalism, and assault increased by 388% over the same period last year. That's just since October 7th. College campuses have been a focal point of this that was mentioned earlier this evening, and I want to just make it really clear that all anti-Israel speech or activity is not anti-Semitic, but a lot of the recent incidents have included anti-Semitic speech or threats, as you heard about. There was a time when I was one of the people who would say, well, that's not going to happen to us. We are a small Jewish community here in Kenosha. I would say we don't have to worry about so much about being targeted by hate groups. And I think maybe it was truer, at least in another time, but I can't confidently say that it's true anymore. In 1985, when I first came to be the rabbi at Beth Hillel Temple, and I would say for a couple of maybe decades, it would be like this. Once in a while, we would get a threatening voice message, a piece of paper dropped in the mail slot, a swastika on our property here or there. There was concern, I remember, in the late 80s or early 90s about skinheads in the area, and one was seen in our parking lot kind of hanging around during our high holy days. But that was about it. I mean, maybe that sounds horrible to you, but that was about it. It seems like nothing right now. During the weekdays, the door to the temple was locked. People had to ring a bell to get in, but during weekly services, the front door was open. Anyone could come in, and we weren't concerned. That seems like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away right now. Over the years, because of incidents elsewhere, primarily, we've become more careful. First of all, I think during the uptick in school violence and just general mass murders and mass shooting incidents in the United States, we began to be more cautious, and we did have our building evaluated by local law enforcement. We've always had security personnel on our well-known, high-profile, high holy days for decades. We started, though, locking our doors about 15 minutes after services started on our weekly Shabbat services. But still, someone could come and ring the bell and be allowed in, and ideally they would be known to us, but I'm not sure they always were. We didn't have any security personnel on a regular Shabbat, so if someone was inside making a judgment call. We installed a camera security system in 2018 because, again, of incidents elsewhere and feeling like we needed something more. So people have to be buzzed in now by someone who knows the community. But back in 2018, we would still let someone in if they didn't raise concerns, however that would be defined. Later that year, the Tree of Life incident in Pittsburgh happened. You saw reference to it on the screen. And I think that really was a wake-up call for the Jewish community in general. We installed a member-only passcode entry and security for events or services with large attendance. We couldn't afford security every week, but this was happening because of this event, the tragic event in Pittsburgh. By the way, this is the anniversary weekend of it this weekend, and we read the names of the people who died that day at our memorial part of our service this time of year, every year. The Jewish community around this time developed its own security network, and we have been fortunate to be advised by the Milwaukee part of that network. Our staff and our volunteers began to take trainings in person and online through the Milwaukee Federation security staff. The Jewish community began to seek and provide grants for security personnel to begin with, and we were able to take advantage of that. But even with the grant, we didn't have security every week until very recently. Then there was the Jacob Blake crisis in Kenosha, and we don't have to tell anyone in this room about that. Our building was really at the geographic center of many tragic events during those few days. We took steps to protect our most precious possessions in the building and our personnel. We closed the building for a few days, sent our staff home to work, and our live-in caretaker somewhere else to stay during that time. We received this advice and help from the Milwaukee Jewish community security staff. And then there was the Colleyville, Texas incident, which I don't know how many of you are familiar with, but in the Jewish community all you have to say is Colleyville, and it's code for a terrible incident that occurred and luckily ended without anyone being killed. But it was a small congregation like ours with a rabbi that I know who's a colleague of mine, who, like our congregation, had a very few people in the room that Saturday morning and a few more online. It was during COVID. It was in January of 2021. Somebody knocked at the door. He didn't know the person. The rabbi didn't know the person, but he was trying to be kind and welcoming, and it looked like the person was cold and needed help, and so we invited him in for a cup of tea. And the fellow stayed around, and the people were welcoming and said, sure, stay, warm up, come and sit with us, we're going to start services. And in the middle of the service, as the rabbi's back was turned, he heard a gun being cocked. And there was an 11-hour standoff. And finally, because this rabbi and some of these people in the room had active threat training, they acted very wisely and were able to escape with hours and hours of FBI and others outside. I hadn't been able to de-escalate the situation. So after that, we invited our entire congregation to an active threat training. We had not yet done that. We learned how to protect ourselves if someone managed to get in. We had another new policy: no one could come in unannounced. That was really painful. You know, we want to be welcoming. We want to encourage people. We want to include people. Come in, sure, see what we're all about. Well, now no one can come in unannounced. So we have a sign on our doors, and we have a sign on our website that unfortunately, due to out of an abundance of caution, we do not allow people unknown to us to come unannounced. They may call ahead and be pre-approved to attend a service or an event, but they can't just walk in. This is very complicated when we have life cycle events like a bar mitzvah or a funeral. It's not a pleasant reality, but we feel we have to do this. And I know the staff here will be here, those on the panel here will be happy to know that we did apply for a grant through FEMA and through WEM, and we received it and are beginning to be able to implement the security equipment and so on that we applied for. It has partly to do with hardware and security tech and so forth, and aspects of our building and property improvements, and also for personnel. We are not alone. Synagogues and Jewish institutions everywhere have taken these same steps. There are still folks I know who are afraid to come to the temple, or who have a level of fear or vigilance while they are at temple. It's very unfortunate, and I think it's been even heightened in these last 3.5 weeks. You know, it may seem strange to you, but things in Israel tend to spill over, and Jews everywhere are then blamed or threatened or attacked when people perceive that Israel has done something wrong. And of course, we know that this also happens and is happening to Muslims across the country because of what's going on in Israel and Gaza right now. And there are other groups, of course, that have these spillover experiences as well. I want to talk also about our interfaith partnerships, which have been very, very key to our feeling of safety and security in Kenosha. Security measures are not the only ways to combat hate. Interfaith partnerships are crucial. And in Kenosha, our partnerships are with CUSH, Congregations United to Serve Humanity, with CFDR, the Coalition for Dismantling Racism. It takes a village to feel secure. We create the village before we need it. And then it's already in place when something happens. Most of the above that I mentioned was in reaction to something that happened elsewhere. But as was mentioned this evening, there was a well-known series of anti-Semitic incidents in Kenosha for about 6 or 8 months between 2021 and 2022 of anti-Semitic flyers that Adeline mentioned that were strewn all over Kenosha in various neighborhoods. It did not affect our security procedures per se, because none of these flyers were distributed at the temple, nothing was aimed at the temple. But it did give us an impetus to work with the interfaith community and to enlist their help on our behalf. And I think even it's fair to say that the interfaith community initiated the desire to want to help. So both CUSH and CFDR had even together informational events for the community where they could learn about anti-Semitism. We brought in experts from the ADL and the Milwaukee Jewish Community Relations Council. CUSH held a couple of solidarity events, vigils that enabled the community to come together and show their concern, and also it felt supportive to the Jewish community. CUSH created a rapid response team so that when those flyering incidents occurred, that people could go out, we could call upon people to go out and gather those flyers before too many people saw them in their neighborhoods, and people were very upset by them when they saw them, so that we could kind of get rid of them, get them to the police. We were very much encouraged by KPD they didn't care how many they got or how many calls they got, they wanted us to turn in these pieces of evidence. And also the Coalition for Dismantling Racism met with KUSD administration because some of these pamphlets appeared on school grounds, and the ADL helped us with their education experts to deal with this on a school level. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't say that the Kenosha Police Department was an absolutely crucial partner in this. They were on top of it, they were investigating it, and finally someone was arrested and fined, and the flyering stopped. None of this could have come together without the beloved community, the village, that was already in place and working together. It helped the Jewish community in this case. And if, or should I say when, needed, it will help other communities in the future. We know, I'm sure all of you know, that there are other congregations that are being defaced or maligned or threatened in our community. It's not just the Jewish community. And the village should be and can be called upon for support for any congregation or group that experiences this. It's often said that the Jewish community is the canary in the coal mine for acts of hate. If it's happening to our community, you can be sure it's happening or it will happen to other groups as well. It's important to be prepared with information, to be prepared psychologically and physically, your physical plant for this eventuality. But above all, it's important to form and strengthen coalitions that are working on these issues. And Kenosha, Cush, CFDR, Kenosha Police Department are the leaders in this regard. We thank you, Cush and CFDR, for your leadership and advocacy, and we thank the Kenosha Police Department for your vigilance in keeping our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, for those heartfelt words. At this time, are there any written questions that we have? We've got a couple. And Ken, would you fill these questions, please, or ask the questions of the panel members? Yes.
All right, first question is, given the extensive problem here in Kenosha and documented racial hate crimes, why no system of threat assessment for domestic terrorism like we had for foreign terrorism? How do we stay safe in the dark? I'm not sure who wants to field this, but we'll start with the chief.
Can you read it again?
All right. Given the extensive problem here in Kenosha and documented racial hate crimes, why is there no system of threat assessment for domestic terrorism like we have for foreign terrorists? How do we stay safe in the dark?
Domestic terrorism, I guess I'm a little confused by the question. We do have, so I guess I'll speak a little bit how, and this pairs a little bit with the types of crime reporting that we had talked about, that it's underreported to the FBI. It has a lot to do with how we document through our IBR reporting. So if it meets certain criteria, then we're reporting to them. So that's the main way we do the tracking for domestic type terrorism. Larger scale domestic type terrorism at a local level would trigger a lot of partnerships and reaching out to our federal partners who have the resources to look further into that than we do. And a lot of the federal statutes are going to be more encompassing of those types of crime. I don't know if you guys want to speak at all to that, but it does speak a little bit about how different types of terrorist threats can be kind of an over-encompassing word, I guess. It spans a large types of crimes.
Yeah, and for the FBI, so I work primarily civil rights violations. We have a separate unit, part of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, or the JTTF, and they are the ones that are responsible for international and domestic terrorism. So there is some overlap between hate crimes and domestic terrorism incidents, but those are ones that we're working jointly together. We rely on our local partners for that as well. But a lot of the concern with domestic terrorism is similar to the civil rights, issues. Like, we need to see that reporting. We need people to report it to us, because if we don't know about it, we can't really do anything about it. And I think the example given with the girl who was doing dishes, who saw something, who said something, that is the key in fighting these types of domestic terrorism issues. So I think that just echoes what we've been saying this presentation.
And the second question is for Chief Patton, because it deals with local law enforcement issues. And it speaks to why are hate crimes committed by local law enforcement so difficult to get convictions on, or why are crimes committed by local law enforcement officers, how are they reviewed, and
the question of transparency with respect to local law enforcement.
Going with the first one, why is it so difficult? I think the slides and the presentation today kind of showed it's that jump of nexus of where is the actual intent, what is the reasoning, and trying to be able to prove the reasoning behind that. So we work with not only our federal partners to determine some of those, but there's also some state legislature and some state laws that actually cover that as well. So I think if you want to say how difficult they are, the big jump would be how are we going to be able to prove the intent or the reasoning behind an individual commits a crime. And I think maybe a prosecutor angle from this might be able to help explain what happens, because it's easy for us to say, this is why they did it, and it's a little bit different on the burden of proof that they will have to produce, or even the lower level that we will have to produce to get to them, that they will then have to produce for a conviction. And I think maybe you might be able to speak further on that portion of it.
Sure, and I wasn't entirely clear from the question, and maybe I'll answer the question two ways, because I think the question was getting at police misconduct as well as hate crimes. On the hate crime side, absolutely true, we have these elements that we have to prove, and one of those is that it's the because of that the crime occurred. So because of a racial animus, because of a hate for someone's gender, because of sexual orientation, that's why you did what you did. That is a hate crime, and we have to prove that. That's not always so easy to do. We've had in Milwaukee a number of transgender women who have been murdered over the last year, about five or six, and of those, very difficult to prove that it was because they were transgender. There were a lot of other issues going on, and those people are charged with those homicides, but not necessarily for hate crimes. So even if we can't get to the hate crime, and this certainly is what I think the chief is getting at as well, is we might not as the prosecutors get to the hate crime, but there's certainly other things that we can charge that will get us to the same result, which is get a very dangerous person out of your community for a period of time, or forever if it's a homicide. So on the hate crimes, we have these elements to meet, but there's a lot of different avenues that we can take to get a person arrested, get a person convicted, get a person sentenced. On the police misconduct side, we also have federal laws and we have state laws. And the state laws, most of those will be misconduct in office, types of offenses, and then for the federal side, we have what's color of law, which is you willfully as a police officer used your position of power to commit some crime. And the very good news about the willful conduct, misconduct by police officers, we have so few federal crimes because officers, by and large, are doing their jobs in the appropriate way across the country. In particular, in Wisconsin, the training is excellent. So we have officers that are really working hard, having a lot of interactions with community members in a positive way. However, we do have officers that step beyond that line, and when that line is crossed, one of the first people that will call us is the chief of police departments. And why is that? Because no one in that department, especially a chief, wants to have that tarnish on their department because they know it hurts police officers in that department and it hurts the community. So Aaron and I are also evaluating on the other side of civil rights police misconduct. So we look at a lot of police misconduct cases, and to prove those types of cases, again, we have to show that an officer knew something was wrong, evaluated it, analyzed that situation, and then took that action anyway. So an example of that would be an officer, the example I give, we do a lot of trainings with police officers as well, just like this, to train them on what is occurring in the community, what a civil rights offense looks like federally, and how to avoid them. So the example I always give for police officers when they're there is, we're in this conversation now for several hours, you know who I am, and you see that this is a microphone in my hand, but an officer shoots me. and then the officer says, well, I thought it was a firearm. Well, we know that isn't true because of all of the context of the situation. We could prove that was a willful bad conduct by a police officer. So that's an example of a willful bad conduct that we evaluate at the Department of Justice. You've seen these cases across the country. George Floyd is probably the most recent and significant misconduct by police officers that has been evaluated by the federal government as well as local prosecutors. And in that case, I think what's important to remember, and it has changed police departments across the country, including Kenosha, is out the expectation is that if there's an officer committing a crime, that's one thing, that officer will get charged or indicted federally. But officers that are there and see the misconduct, as with George Floyd, he was on his stomach, an officer was choking him by having his knee on his neck. The other officers that were there didn't take any action to stop the misconduct. And they also were indicted and convicted. And so there is a significant effort by law enforcement, police agencies, FBI, federal and state prosecutors to prevent that kind of misconduct. And I can say with some pretty significant confidence after going through our training programs in this state with police officers, conducting training with police agencies across this state. We have some very good police officers and we have really good training. And what we saw in Minneapolis, I don't see that happening here just because the training is so good. But if we do see it, we will take the actions that need to, as will a chief of police. You will take actions when there's misconduct as well.
And I'm breaking the rule.
Just 1 second, because there was a lady in the back with the red
Okay.
shirt on that had her hand up.
Okay.
Miss, you had your hand up earlier?
That was just my question. I was going to give you some clarification, that's all. The first one.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, when we were worried about domestic terrorism less than foreign terrorism, it was like a yellow thread or a green thread or a red thread or whatever. And given everything that's happened in the last 3 years here in Kenosha, I'm one of the Mythbreaks families in Pleasant Prairie that has experienced issues. I don't understand how we're supposed to assess if it's safe to let my 18-year-old mixed-race kid out if I have no idea what's going on. I mean, it seems like it's almost blind faith anymore to let you go out by yourself, which doesn't strike me as good parenting. So I was looking to see if there was going to be something comparable coming so areas like this can get some idea of what we're actually facing.
So just to clarify this a little bit on the federal side, we don't have a domestic terrorism statute where we charge people with domestic terrorism. But there are different ways that we can charge people with hate crimes. There are certainly state laws to charge people with what we call domestic terrorism. It's such a broad title. I'm not entirely sure what it encompasses. However, threats in our community, the police department, I know this police department, I know FBI are constantly looking at threats, local threats in your community, identifying people that are causing problems, identifying groups that are causing problems, identifying weapons coming into communities, weapons leaving communities. So there is a lot of threat analysis that is occurring that probably fall under what you would call domestic terrorism. There's all different types of threats that are being analyzed by law enforcement, by prosecutors, by local police, by federal agents, by the CIA, by Homeland Security. So we're evaluating all of these threats, looking for the person who will go into a church and use a firearm to shoot people. We're looking for the person who is at the local level. They're evaluating the person who is a drug addict that's causing problems in the local stores to try to intervene. There's all different types of threat analysis that are occurring every day, all day long within law enforcement. So domestic terrorism, what we call domestic terrorism, I don't believe is being missed. I don't believe it's being missed at all. because we are working local and federal on identifying problems. I guess that's really what we're getting at with this training, and what I'm hoping to answer that question is communities. We are looking at problems in communities and trying to find answers. And one of the ways that we can do that is have trainings like this. We can have discussions where people can give us information about things that they are seeing. We can give information back on problems that we are seeing in communities. So I'm hoping that answers your question, that what I think you're calling domestic terrorism is being evaluated and analyzed not only by federal but by local police as well.
And I can, just as a side note, I'll share with you from a personal perspective. I know this firsthand because we're in the process now where I've been receiving personal threats that have been investigated by the Secret Service and the Marshal Service. So there are investigative agencies taking advantage of that. Again, it may not fall under the umbrella of domestic terrorism or whatever that title actually means, but there are actions being taken. And Ellen, you had a
Yeah.
question?
I didn't write my question down, but the training that you mentioned, Mr. Ladwick, that's available to law enforcement officers, has that training ever been provided to the Kenosha Police Department? And it's a question for you all also, Chief. And how is that done? Does a request have to be made, or are there situations where you would just go in and provide the training? So it's for both of you.
Sure, I'll go first. We
Repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, the question is, how do we facilitate training for police departments on color of law violations, so police misconduct trainings? We do this by connecting with police departments. In fact, we do it often at groups like this, where they say, hey, have you contacted the chief of police at our community? And we say, no, we haven't. Do you know him? Yes. Can you have her contact me? And then we start the conversation. There is a belief that the federal government can do whatever it wants. I cannot go into a police department without being invited by the chief and begin a training in the police department. So I have no doubt that the chief would be happy to have us do that training. We haven't had that conversation yet. Tonight was actually the first night I've met the chief of police, first time he's met me. He probably didn't even know we had this training. So that's why these kinds of meetings are very important. The training costs $500,000 for a police department. I'm just kidding. It's completely free. It's a free training, and we have done this, probably 100 times in the last 3 years. We have gone to police departments and training. And what does that training look like? It looks like this. Aaron and I discuss what federal law looks like. We discuss what misconduct looks like. We do a lot of training scenarios. We ask a lot of questions, and we have a good conversation with officers. And it's not always a comfortable conversation, right? Because it's not what officers really want to talk about. But by the end of that conversation, we have never left without everyone coming up and saying, hey, that was really useful. That was really impactful training to have, so I understand now what this looks like, and I understand how to avoid it as police officers. And really, how to avoid it is quite easy for police officers because they already have the training to do it. And that's really what we're reiterating in that training, is follow your policies and procedures and help each other. One of the important parts of this training that I think that combine the hate crime and police misconduct trainings is there are all these points of intervention, and then we have, like John said, you have the boom, right? You have the event that occurs. When you look back over that left side of that event, everything that happened before, just like police misconduct, just like hate crimes, there's all these points where an officer, a supervisor, a friend, a wife, a husband could have done something to stop that event from occurring. And that's a lot of what we talk about with the police training as well.
And just to follow up on that, that's kind of what tonight's all about. When I came in early January, we knew the training that we had gotten already. We know that every year we go through training with the district attorney's office. They put us through legal updates, and that's required by every officer on our agency. We started identifying where we might be lacking, and where we've found the most was with the relationships with the federal partners and who can bring in the training, because training's expensive, like he had said, but who can offer it to us for free, and which ones can we say have value and that we can bring back. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but the U.S. Attorney's Office has reached out consistently with the types of training we want. As recently as this week, has asked, what other trainings do you need? And that was one of the emphasis I put on when I came in was, let's take as much of it as possible and start training up. Plus, we're a very, very young department, so we need it more than ever. Luckily, as he was speaking, we get a lot of training from our district attorney's office and direction there. But a lot of the legislature, we also have to go to those updates. Act 75 and some of the duty to intervene laws that have gone through have prompted some of the training that we're required to go through from the state level, and including intertwining communication and tactics to try to look at ways to promote that intervention from officers when we see color of law violations or misconduct violations. So they're there and they're increasing.
Yeah, and I guess my follow-up question is, have you requested this particular training? Does it have to be done for the entire force, or can you do it for certain officers?
This specific, like the one tonight, for
the color of law, the one that Mr. Lab.
that one's done for all officers. That's a requirement. And then we also partner with our liabilities insurance companies, CIVMIC, which is one that provides some of that for us. And then it just through our policies and all the other trainings they go through. And then what we try to do to make it effective to get through the entire department is find trainings that are train the trainer. So we get people that are trained to teach the types of skill sets that we're trying to learn, and then they bring it back to our department. One of the things that we had never had prior to this year was a training facility. We just don't have a facility to train our officers. The city has responded with some of the requests I've made. We've taken over a facility that was not being utilized by the city, turned it into a training facility. We looked at different ways that we can maximize our training without increasing our costs. We do a lot of the virtual reality training now and stuff like that. But we've put an emphasis, and I have individuals here in the department that have been here even longer than I have that will probably testify to how training has increased over the last year to 2 years, and how there's more of an emphasis to make sure that we're bringing that into our department.
The young lady in the back right there, and then I'll come to you, Councilman.
My question is more so for public safety, and I know you guys said your field officers are in Milwaukee. When it comes to schooling, at what point can you protect, I'm an instructor at Milwaukee Area Technical College, how can you, oh, just turn.
As far as the protection, you said like in public places, we cannot keep people out of public places. So the college is considered public, okay? But then there's other schools that some of my peers that worked at, where they're locked, like here, Bradford is locked, the elementary schools are locked. Why can't we lock our colleges? Because we're in fear. Like we're locking our doors to teach, we're covering our windows, and we cannot keep people, the public, out. You know, they run through the hallways, they just do whatever they want to do. Why can't that be done?
I can't speak for the colleges specifically, they're individual organizations. I don't think anyone up here has any control or power over what they do, but what we try to do is raise awareness, right? That's what we talk about, some of our crime prevention, partnering with different organizations and talking about the steps they can do to make their buildings and their facilities still secure. Obviously, public institutions and certain things need to be accessible, but to what point?
They locked it down during COVID, you know, so it can be locked down. I understand that, I know it's maybe apples and oranges, but.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, we just try to provide the, I guess, the information of what might make them safer. Again, they're individual organizations. I don't think anyone up here has the power to, tell them what to do. We can just try to say, hey, here are some best practices. And that's where some of the individuals that spoke, I don't know if any others want to.
Maybe the attorney, like, is that against the law, right? Or because it's a public
Not necessarily. It depends. I've worked with other universities on public safety issues, and there's a lot of different steps universities can take for public safety. So, you know, this, for example, this is a public building.
Right.
However, you can lock it at a certain point. You can prevent people coming in if you're having an event, for example. So there's a lot of different ways that you can prevent access to locations without running afoul of discrimination. But then there are times that you do run afoul of discrimination, and so that's where you have to be careful. And I don't know enough about the details of this particular situation to say why the building is, it seems very accessible. I'm not sure. I haven't been to the location, but it's certainly something I think I know John's there at the end, and has looked at universities and schools and from a safety perspective. So I think that's something that certainly they would be willing to maybe not do themselves, but get you in contact with the administration, in contact with the appropriate people that do an evaluation. Crime prevention through environmental design is another term of how do you protect a physical space from criminal activity.
Yeah.
Or unwanted activity or nuisance activity.
And again, a lot of this is driven by cost too, right? So you can do certain things like we talked about in this building, or Waukesha County Technical College, or any of the technical college system. Some of those have public safety teams, some do not. And even like the federal courthouse in Milwaukee, that's a public building. You can go to it. If you've been there, you realize you're going to go through security, but realize that there's a cost associated with it. There's permanent staff there. They're trained. They're doing magnetometers. You're not going to be bringing in anything you want, but there is a cost associated with it. Same thing with technical college. You could do certain things to harden your perimeter, but that may come at a cost. So you can look at what are some other things we can do. We can provide suspicious activity awareness training to our staff, making sure that they're immediately reporting that sort of thing. If you do have significant concern, maybe you're locking down non-essential access points so that, you know, we saw a lot of this uptick in criminal activity with like the Kia boys and things like that. If we channel folks into one or two primary exits or entrances, now we're able to better monitor and assess who's coming into our building, as opposed to we have 12 or 15 entrances into this building. Now we have two, one on the east side, one on the west side, but we still have 12 exits for emergency egress purposes, but now we can better monitor those one or two primary access points, and maybe we put an individual designated for safety or security, and that's our role to do initial assessment, engage folks. I mentioned earlier that power below. Something as simple as engaging an individual might be that initial assessment of, is this person here with good intentions, or do they have some sort of nefarious intent? Hey, welcome to the school. You know, do you know where you're going? Yeah, leave me alone. Okay, that you just told me with your demeanor and with your tone, maybe you don't belong here, and now I'm going to flag that as potential concern, and we might look into that further. Versus, oh hey, I'm running late to school and I'm about to be late for my class. I have an exam today. I'm just trying to get to my class. So there's a lot of things you can do without a ton of cost, but again, you have to run that through your administration, make sure that they understand what you're trying to do and why.
And I do want to say that they do give us training, and everything you said, they are doing it, but I was just wondering, why can't we just lock the doors? So it's just, is it a law or what? That's what I was just wondering.
Yeah, I don't believe that it's a law that you can't.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm not the expert in that, but
Okay.
there's things you can do to, I guess, harden your perimeter or,
Yes.
or increase your security posture. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, I have a bit of a nuts and bolts kind of question. Back when we were having the anti-Semitic flyers, Rabbi Feingold and Chief Patton remember that, you know, some of us suggested pursuing this person by, you know, citing him for littering, which is, of course, you know, maybe a misdemeanor, but at least it gives the police an opportunity to, you know, pursue somebody, give them arrest, at least fine them, etc. And for whatever reason, the DA decided not to prosecute him, but at least he became known, and my understanding is he moved out of the area, good riddance. But at the same time, my question is, could we not do, I know there are free speech things involved, But if somebody is doing graffiti that is targeting a group, hate-filled, is graffiti not in itself vandalism, and is vandalism not a prosecutable thing? So if somebody, even if somebody puts swastikas, not necessarily on a synagogue like Beth Hillel, but perhaps across the street, you know, on a public library, which is not necessarily a religious institution, but graffiti is in itself a crime, as far as I'm concerned. It's vandalism. So can somebody performing this vandalism not be prosecuted for a hate crime?
So there, for a federal hate crime, we're going to need additional information on what they're doing, right? We're going to need the violence aspect plus the hate crime. So, or the defacing of a church or a religious property, right? So, for example, one of the examples that I gave earlier was in a Jewish cemetery, someone went in, defaced all of the headstones and broke the headstones. That falls under that church arson statute. That would be an example of a property damage federal law that we could look at. But most property damage without any kind of violence with it is going to end up being a property damage state case. So that's something that can be evaluated by your county prosecutor's office in Kenosha. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a misdemeanor either. Depending on the amount of that property damage, it can go up to a felony, and I think it's $2,500. At that point, anything above that, which is pretty easy to reach, I think at this point, would end up being potentially a felony charge as well. So there's some options for the federal, but I would say, like most of these property damages, unless it's a clear hate crime with a church property or connected to a true threat or violence, it would be at the state case, state prosecutor's office. But that's not a bad thing. I think I was a state prosecutor myself. That's a good thing. State prosecutors are as good, well, not better, but they're as good as us, I would say, some of them. So I think that's, you have to look at these. I think what happens is people see federal prosecutor or a federal case, because we always say don't make a federal case out of it. It sounds like a really big deal, and it usually is when we get a case. We have a very small caseload, and they're supposed to be significantly impactful cases. But answering problems, whatever they are, we have to use all of our methods. So local police, FBI, HSI, schools, colleges, prosecutors, jails, probation, all of these things are meant to answer a problem, to stop whatever activity it is that we're trying to stop. So don't think because it doesn't turn into a federal hate crime that it's a failure to have any significance or impact. That's just not the case. And I think the chief knows this. You have a significant impact with your local prosecutors, your county prosecutors. And they are doing 99% of the cases in this community. 99.99% of the cases in this community. But there are those cases that do fall into the federal lane, and we'll take those. But these are just options to solve problems. One's not necessarily better than the other, in my opinion. You might disagree.
We have a question here.
You mentioned the West Dallas case earlier where there was some sort of hate crime and he was fined. Is there something similar to like the sex offender registry where we can have, the public can have access to the information of the citizens in our community that have been fined or charged in some way so that we can also be the eyes and ears out in the community and know who to watch for?
Sure. So the first, the guy in West Dallas, he was indicted and he went to prison. So he wasn't fined. We don't do any kind of fines usually in the federal system. So all of our cases end up going to federal prison. The good thing for you is anytime the federal government does anything, we do a press release. So anything that we have is online. That case is online. There's a whole bunch of information about it from the Journal Sentinel did a story on it, and then we do press releases. On our U.S. Attorney's Office, Eastern District of Wisconsin webpage, you type that into Google, you'll end up on our webpage. It's got all of our press releases, and they will have all the hate crimes. FBI has information on all of their hate crimes that they're involved with as well. As far as local prosecution to get that kind of information, I don't know if the local prosecutors here do the same thing, but in Milwaukee County, we used to do this. We used to come to meetings every once in a while and talk about different cases that we have. And I know your chief here is going out to all different types of community organizations and having these conversations. So I think that's one of the easiest ways to do it is connecting with your police department and connecting with your local prosecutors. And of course, you can always contact me, and I'm happy to tell you if we have anything federally going on that I can talk about. If you haven't guessed yet, I can barely talk about anything that we are working on. That's just kind of our rules in the Department of Justice. A lot of lids on different information that we have. But Erin, she'll tell you everything that she can talk about from the FBI, and your chief, he will tell you everything that he can talk about as well as far as investigation. So it's a matter of, is there one pot to go look at for all this information? There isn't, but there's a lot of different ones that you can pull from to get information.
And just to clarify, what Chris is saying on those press releases, those are cases that have been mitigated. If there's an ongoing investigation, we can't share any information. You won't find that online.
But is it similar to like when we have, I know we get, like on Facebook or something, you can see somebody will post a list of all the drunk drivers that have been cited or whatever. Is there something like that where there's one place that we can go and, what's that? Exactly, exactly.
There's not a registry for those types of crimes at the state level that I'm aware of. But there are, and we do press releases for those types of cases once we've closed them and they've gone over to the district attorney's office. We coordinate with them to make sure that it's something that's going to continue to be prosecuted before we release that, to make sure we're not releasing something that's not going to end up being prosecuted. But I would say that the best tracking of that are organizations like the Anti-Defamation League that kind of continue to put out that information of instances that happen. They try to share a lot of that information. A lot of the information they have is very similar to what we get and work with our federal partners and our state, local agencies to get together in our fusion centers to try to share the information as much as possible. For us, we know a press release goes out and then it's that day's news and it keeps moving, right? So unless you want to dig through the archives of our press releases, we don't have like a running log of what arrests we make. Most of that is run by media. So those are the organizations that I know of that are out there that can kind of point you in the direction of where are we seeing, certain acts or an uptick in acts or, help you get some of the local perspective.
So that sounds like it's more like statistical versus who the actual individuals are, not that are suspected of it, but that have been charged with it, so that we know they're out in the public and I want to keep my eye on this person if they're near me.
I've seen the Anti-Defamation League actually put out people that they're aware of. And, I don't know if anyone here has seen any of the same stuff, but yeah, I've seen them actually follow individuals and say these are individuals we know that have arrived at this event. A lot of people that are willing to do this site and have their actions driven by hate will follow areas. They won't just hit singular communities. They will go down to rallies in different areas, or they'll go down to celebrations or religious events in different areas. So organizations like the Anti-Defamation League are going to be able to compile that and share that and say these are the individuals that are showing up at different events. So I think they do a pretty good job. Now it's a private organization, but again, we do the press releases. We don't have like a running log of updates of where the individuals are, unless we have a crime release on them.
And is that open to public records, the open record laws or whatever, is that something that we would have access to?
To like if we make an arrest or
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anytime, any open records request would go through our Office of Public Information, and as long as the case is closed, there's certain parameters that we can't release, but anything redacted we put out.
Here's the last question of the evening.
Can't stand this pressure. I've heard tonight, I think it's great, I appreciate y'all coming. I do have one question though. I haven't heard anything specific. For example, Southern Poverty Law Center's got a pretty good map of hate groups in the United States out there. I haven't heard any mention from anybody of organized. It seems like all the examples I've been given tonight are people whose elevators have stopped short of the top floor. Is there any sign of organized hate groups within this town right now where there are, or this county, fair enough? I haven't heard any discussion of that. I haven't heard any mention of that. And then, Chief, I would appreciate a nod at the end of that answer to that question in the direction of, I'm aware of at least 3 cases of people who've tracked down members of hate groups and have found them in uniform. In the uniform of a local police agency or a deputy's department or something like that. So maybe you could address what the Kenosha Police Department is doing to make sure we don't recruit anybody from a hate organization into the ranks of our peace officers. So I'll leave it at that. Is that okay? Thanks.
So specific examples of arrests we've made, is that what your question is, of like cases that we've brought forward?
No, I think the larger question is what hate groups are working here in this area.
Correct.
That are organized,
Yep.
right, as opposed to the odd man out. And then the second part is, do you have a process whereby when you acquire new officers, they are investigated? I don't know what your procedures are.
So for the first one, right now, the biggest way we were able to look at that is we changed, a couple years ago, we changed the title of what we did as far as investigating groups and organizations in our town. For years, I know it's talked about our gang unit, right? Everyone talks about the gangs. We changed that and realized that we need to reclassify that as a special investigations unit and start looking at the big picture. Gangs obviously are a problem in our community and any community, right? But what is being organized and what acts are being carried out? So that special investigations unit has the capability of they identify what the actual problem and what trends we're starting to see in our community specifically, and that's what they're assigned to go dig into. Right now, as far as acts of like hate groups acting out and stuff like that, we don't have any current like huge glaring concerns. Obviously, we have people that belong to all different types of organizations. We don't have any groups that are acting out upon any of that right now. Currently, we haven't made any arrests. Like we talked about the media releases we would make. So there's really nothing that we would report as far as this is a group that we have a huge concern with in our community. And then when the second part of your question, we do an extensive background check on every single person that we end up pushing through to our Police and Fire Commission. And it's not just us completing the background check. We submit that background check to the entire Police and Fire Commission. Some of those individuals have different varying backgrounds, specifically one that did those for the FBI. So we have kind of that luxury to make sure that when we do these checks, we dig into the individual's social media, we dig into their past practices, organizations that they're in, so that we make sure that we're doing everything we can. We do psychological backgrounds. We're doing everything we can to make sure that the people that we're putting into our uniforms, into our department and bringing in are being vetted properly. So we do those, we submit those, and it's not just reviewed by us, it's submitted to our Police and Fire Commission.
Well, again, this concludes the official portion of our program. I have to stress again the need to sign in and provide your contact information so we can share the slide information that was presented here, because again, it was a lot of information, and we want to make sure you leave well-informed and have the ability to reference material once you get back to your homes or businesses. So that concludes our presentation. Thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you for everyone who has hung on and for all these good questions and all this information. We want to thank our guests, John Bush from Homeland Security, Rabbi Dina Feingold from Beth Hillel, Chief Patton of KPD, Ken Gales from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Special Agent Aaron Luker, and also
Chris Ladwig.
Chris Ladwig from the U.S. Attorney's Office. So thank you all for being here. I am charged with giving the call to action for tonight, and I want to say that Chris Ladwig said in the beginning, and I remember what you said because your quote was really good, that community members are the lifeblood to crime prevention. So, you know, we're all here because we want to be united against hate. And we do that by lifting up our power as a community, by coming together. So please, I ask these three things of you. One, like it's been said over and over and over again, like we've taught our children, if you see something, say something. You've been told over and over again that nothing is too small, just say something. Second, stand up to bullies. Stand up to organizations that are in our community who mean ill towards others. Stand up to them online by not interacting with them and elevating their presence. And then finally, actively support these faith communities and other organizations that are here and you know that they're being attacked. If they don't hear from you, all they hear from are the people who mean them harm. So make a phone call, write a handwritten letter, let them know that you support them. And then the final, for the end of the evening, I'm going to invite Yolanda Jackson-Lewis up. She has something, a prevention program from KUSD that she'd like to mention.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I was sitting here this evening and I said, I leaned forward to one of my KUSD colleagues and I said, I gotta make this announcement. So thank you, Adeline. And I do know some people, so it's good to know people. And I realize I'm standing in between you getting out of here and going home. But thank you again for your time and attention, and to our panelists this evening. We've heard about the see something, say something. Kenosha Unified School District has, and I feel like having y'all chant something tonight that y'all look tired, so I say SUSO, you say so. Anyway, but SUSO, SUSO, speak up, speak out. It is a Wisconsin Department of DOJ, Wisconsin DOJ has a resource center. It is a free resource to our schools. It is a tip line. You can look it up, speak up, speak out at wi.gov, widoj.gov, or you can call my SUSO, 1-800-MY-SUSO-1, 1-800-MY-SUSO-1 to report anything. So we're teaching our students this. So if you are parents in the room, your grandparents, you are students, for the students in the room, speak up, speak out. It is a KUSD community thing. Everyone has an opportunity to make a report. It's not just for students or staff. It's not just about keeping our schools safe, it's about keeping our community safe. I want to end with all these nice quotes we were getting this morning, but this evening, I heard Rabbi Feingold mention, you create the village before you need it, right? So that is what we need to be doing. We're creating this village because we all need each other to make sure that we're safe in our community. So again, SUSO. Okay, no, I won't do it. All right, speak up, speak out. Thank you so much.